We're having. Sorry for the weird intro. I was having tech issues on the back end and I was trying to fix it and then I did. And so it will look right on LinkedIn. YouTube, it might be a little weird because it went live there first. So welcome everybody to the show, Breaking Into Tech. I'm excited to be here with Taevin. I said it wrong, even though I just asked him how to say his name. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Taevin.
But yeah, Taevin, I just asked you and I was like, say it right. So welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here to hear about your time at Savio and what you're doing today. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So let's start with a little bit about who you are, your background. I saw that you had a little bit of military experience, so tell us about that and just tell us like who you are and how, and a little bit about your background.
Definitely. Yeah. So, hello, everyone. My name is Taevin Bellamy. I was a Savio alumni back in August of cohort 117. And so just to begin, I was in the military for about 6 years straight out of high school. I had a passion in business, but the military had better benefits. So, so I went there. I did weather forecasting actually in the military. For the entirety of the 6 years. And it was a really fun job, very data oriented and some physical science and stuff got to play with. But it wasn't like a real like calling for me just because there was a lot of moving around and like back and forth. And I wanted like a stability thing. And I also enjoyed working from home. So I was starting to look into different things that the Veterans Association offered. And I fell into VetTech. And VetTech offered like a multitude of different schools that they had on their approved list. And so what I did, I just kind of started walking it down, and I ended up finding Savio on there. So I did some research, and I was trying to relate software engineering to like my current skills. And from what I was reading online and then trying to apply it, it seemed like it was like not compatible. So I was like, okay. Maybe I'll just give it a try and just see if I can do it. And then after watching some videos of Gregorio kind of just talking about it and talking through it, I started to notice that it actually did complement what I had done before and just like general soft skills. And it kind of incorporated all that into this like perfect package that I was looking for. It offered remote setting in the industry. It offered great pay. There wasn't too much of an intense training behind it, like military boot camp, for example. And yeah, so I really just picked up on my passion for solving problems, and now here I am, 7-8 months later, employed as a software engineer, and looking at myself soon to become a senior engineer as I'm giving advice now and giving back. So it's just a crazy dynamic of like how fast things can change for you. And here I am today, a veteran software engineer.
That's so awesome. And so you mentioned VetTech, and I know VetTech has run out of funds and they won't have funds again until October, which is a real bummer because it's such a great program. But October is also not that far away. I mean, it's right around the corner. So if you're looking into Savio and you're thinking this is your time to do your research and figure out what's next, and maybe even do some preliminary coursework to start getting to learn coding so that you can wait for those funds to open up. And when you said you went to the VetTech website, were you like immediately drawn to software engineering, or were you just looking at different programs? How did that process work when you were looking at VetTech?
Definitely. So originally there was no specific scope of what I wanted to do. It was just an idea that I wanted to do something different. And I was just looking at the means of how I could do that. And I think there were some I think there were like IT management positions or some kind of something dealing with just like IT in general that VetTech offered. But being an AG, I worked a lot with ITs in the military, and it just didn't seem like it was something I wanted to do. So the software engineering, again, had no understanding of really what it was. In my head, when I thought of software engineering, I'm thinking of like the TV shows in Hollywood where there's a person behind a computer and their fingers are going 70,000 miles an hour. So like that's what I'm visualizing. So when I came into kind of watching some more videos on YouTube of what engineers do on a day-to-day basis, and this was like my pre applying to vet tech and everything. It was just really just getting information and seeing what that life would look like. I feel like it's really important to understand what it's going to look like, where you're going, to understand if you actually want to go there or not. So I watched videos and YouTube, they love to pump that idea of remote. You can do it quick and everything. So it kind of caught me onto that, and that's kind of I just took it and I said, well, if they can make it happen, there's no reason I can't.
Yeah. And were you like in the process of transitioning out of the Navy, or were you already out of the Navy, and like where were you in that time frame?
Yeah, I was actually transitioning out at the time. Funny enough, there was an IT guy he was a civilian at the time, but he was a veteran. He had came to our command to do some computer work on some kind of firewall or something. And we just struck up a conversation inside of the lobby, and he was telling me that he was actually using VetTech, and he was using his GI and doing all these little things and just giving me all these like little tips and tricks when I get to the other side. So that thing just kind of sat in my head. And when I actually transitioned out is when I really pulled trigger on looking through the vet tech stuff and looking up all of the things that the VA offered, because I couldn't really do anything with it until I got the veteran badge. So it was kind of just on that back burner. But yeah, it was just some random conversation from a random IT, and he just introduced it to me. So that's how I found out it was available. But thankfully now the VA they're very bolsterous about the vet tech program, and it's come to my email on a regular basis. So I think the word of it's getting out.
Yeah, I feel like the VA and a lot of the veteran programs have a good network within the veteran community, but it's hard to get connected with people on active duty. It's like two different silos. And
Yeah.
so it's like, how do we get these resources that the people who are about to transition need into their hands? Like veterans know about it, but you want to learn about it before you're a veteran, like early in, like while you're getting out, because the more that you know about before, the better that you could be prepared. Because I feel like there's this big gap, and I know the VA is working hard to bridge that gap and change. I got out in 2013 and there was like no information. There was a 2-hour brief about what the VA does, which 2 hours is not enough for all the things the VA does. And so I know they're changing that and working to get there, but I'm glad that you connected with another veteran, because I think other veterans are like the best resource for telling you, oh, well, you could go A, B, C, and D here. And it's like a whole nother language that takes time to learn. So
Really, it really is.
yeah. So you got connected and you're learning. And so did you go to an info session with Savio to learn about it a little bit more? Or what was the final step of you deciding, I'm going to go and do this boot camp? Not as intense as real boot camp for the military, but still a boot camp.
Yeah. So yeah, I did attend a Savio info session. I kind of went through the ringer process, and I'm one of those people, like when I get my mind set on something, like, okay, I'm going to do this, I start just like my buttons just start firing. I know exactly what I need to type, where I need to type it, filling out applications. And it seemed almost like I was just in the Slack community like immediately. So I got all of that stuff set up, really just downloading Slack and adding my email, right? But then once I got into the community and I could see like who the owners and the trainers and the instructors were, the first thing I did was I sent them a group message. Actually, I sent Liliana, Gregorio, and I think it was Zachary. It was like one of the instructors, and I sent them a group message just saying, "Hey, I'm new here. I have no idea what's going on. I'm really looking forward to getting into the program. If somebody could give me some guidance on kind of what I'm supposed to be doing." And it was like within 5 minutes, I had multiple responses, and they put me on the right path. It got me set up with the admissions team to get me in the info session to actually get my the veteran paperwork, basically all of that situated, taken care of. That way I could start. But I will probably get into the boot camp stuff. But my coming into the boot camp was a 2-part series, because there was the 17-week program wasn't offered when I originally joined or wanted to join. So I sat on pre-work for a while and then joined. But I think we come to that in a little bit. So I'll talk about that soon.
Yeah, that was actually where I was going next, to talk about what was it like to start the program. So just dive right in with that.
Perfect. So yeah, so as I was getting into the paperwork and stuff, the original preached course that they had was the 13-week course, which is still amazing track. It's plenty of time to learn. And if you're doing the little pre-work, which is the extra 4 weeks in the 17-week, if you do that on your own, relatively, you can jump into the 13-week program and just get rolling. However, I did do the pre-work and I was doing it. And when I got to that point of the final test, I got just cold feet. I think it was just, I didn't feel like, I basically just had imposter syndrome. I felt like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know enough to do it all. And it was immobilizing for a moment. So I kind of just kept looking over the pre-work. And I actually think around that time was when the VA, like they had ran out of funding right before, and then October came, and that's why I tried to join then. The 13-week program was there. I did the pre-work, and then life happened. I fell off of it forward 6 months into April. They had the 17-week program when I had reached back out, and I was like, yep, I'm doing it, because we get to go back over the pre-work. So I jumped into the 17-week program, and I started. First 4 weeks was pre-work, so I got to go back through it. And I think that for me was just like the solidifier. Like, okay, this is I'm doing this. I get this. I understand it. I can do it. All I need is a little bit more training, and I know I can get a job. And yeah, and that's kind of, and like right when I started, that's where my head was. And yeah, that first 4 weeks of just going back through what I had went through by myself was extremely important to the development of like overtime, because that I got repetition, I had time in just understanding the lingo, and it just became a lot more comfortable to get into that industry versus trying to do it on my own by myself the whole time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes sense why they switched to that 17-week where, you have the support of not only like the teachers, but, did you have the support of your classmates in that time so that you weren't alone, and just, someone holding you accountable? It makes a lot of sense why they would switch over to a method where you guys are all together, going through it together and not on your own. Because I bet it takes a lot of discipline to do that on your own. And so that makes a lot of sense.
Very much.
Yeah. And then you were like, and I still don't feel confident even though I did the work. So if you have like your
Right.
instructor, giving you those words of affirmation saying, no, you understand it, that is another thing that adds to it.
Yeah, and I think that it was like they were almost like my stop sign, because when you're learning things like this, your brain just starts going off on a road, and it's like, well, what if this, and what if this, and what if this? So it's the instructors came in handy to give you that stop sign, to be like, okay, well, the what ifs don't really matter in the scenario. You just need to understand this. And if you can understand this and you can replicate this with multiple different logics, you got all you need. And I said, so it can really be this simple?
So you were making it more complicated than it really was.
Yes. And I feel like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I said, because you didn't have that stop sign of someone saying, no, this is all you need. And you had made it like this giant hill to climb when it was really just a little bump.
Very much. Yeah. And I think imposter syndrome comes into that part a little bit. But with my background in weather forecasting in the military, it's a very like, do this and don't say anything about it, right? Like you just follow orders. Well, it's not like that in the AG community, the weather forecasting, because weather is not exact. and it's a beautiful science, but it's not exact, and it's forever changing, and it's completely fluid dynamic. So there can be one person that looks at it one way and another person that looks at it another way, and just based off experience or the data that whatever model they're pulling from, their forecast could be completely different. And not in like one's raining, one's not, but just in a sense of safety, right? And we have to go back and forth with these kind of conversations, and you have to really tunnel vision, or not tunnel vision, just kind of like tunnel in and dive into all these what if scenarios. And in software, it's kind of like that, but just like the baby version. It's like you want to make sure nothing breaks, but at the end of the day, like unless you're trying to design like an AI system, sometimes it's just get the stop sign, make sure it works, and then continue on.
That makes a lot of sense, like your background, because when you are a weather specialist, you like safety, like the decisions that you made affected people's lives, and so it makes sense that you'd have to have that back and forth conversation, because what you guys determine, had an effect on the mission and potentially could, save lives. And so it makes sense that you would be in that mindset. And so when you're thinking, like that's what you've been trained to do, and so then
Right.
you're thinking the same way, and then having the instructor like redirect you into the path of software engineering. That's really interesting. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a crazy dynamic to come from weather into software, but it's also so similar in a way. Like just the way I work on a computer feels very, very familiar.
Yeah. I mean, I could say that like being a weather meteorologist is like an art and a science, and then software engineering, it has its own art and science to it. There's, different ways to code, different ways to write. And so I that makes a lot of sense. I think that's
Definitely.
really cool. So let's dive in. You've got your introductory work done, and so now you're into the like meat of the boot camp, working with your cohort. What was that experience like?
Yes, so that was very fun for me because I got to have the opportunity to go in person. Now, when I say in person, it's more of like we're in a business office and we all have our computer set up and we're coding on our own, but in that space, we can collaborate together. So basically, fast forward through the first 4 weeks of the course, doing pre-work and just really getting familiar with everything. You then start learning the add-on packages and things that make software engineering or learning software engineering in this day and age more relevant, because you start learning new technologies that are actually being used by corporations, right? The beginning of it, you learn web development, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, like, and you can get a job doing that alone. But if you want to be impactful and you want to really know software engineering in a wide variety, like then you learn React, right? And then we go into SQL and C Sharp, and if you're going that track, and then the full stack. So once we got into that part, there was like a very dynamic shift in energy from everyone in the cohort, because everyone went from like super confident to like super nervous, deer in headlights again. And it was crazy because we all, at that point though, we all had a nice camaraderie with each other, nice like group setting, and we were able to kind of help each other and push each other get through that. And I feel like that dynamic for me is just what it just kept that, like that boost. Like I love doing this. I love doing this. Cause even though you code on your own, you still get to have that team dynamic, and the software doesn't function without the team dynamic. So it's like you work remote and you would feel like you're isolated, but if you don't have a team, it doesn't work. So it's really cool in that sense. Going through the program, there was a lot of times I had just questions about things that I was trying to do. Like I would get a task. Hey, I need you to do this and make it do this. Okay, cool. And then you go and do it, and you run into issues. You run into problems, and you're like, man, I don't have enough experience, right? I just can't get through it. And then boom, ask a question. And they beat it into your head every single day, every 10 minutes in boot camp. Like if you have a question, ask it. You can't get the answer unless you ask the question. So first and foremost, I would rely on devs that were around me, or just in my cohort. I would just send them a message if I was at home doing it. And we would talk. But if I really couldn't figure it out, or they had no idea what it was, I would go ask an instructor and have in-depth conversation, I would come to there with my question and the things that I had tried to do, in a lot of context. And I would explain all this to them, and then I would hear their response. And most of the time, it would upset me because it was like right in front of my face, and it's like a period or something, or some semicolon somewhere or something. Right? It's always something funny. But the instructors, they didn't just give me the answer. The instructors would walk me through my thinking, and they would point out things that would direct me to the answer. So I was still having to work my brain muscles, and I still was having to think critically about the problem. But instead of them just giving it to me, I guided myself into the problem, which is normally what happens when you talk about it out loud. So yeah, and just, I know this one's a kind of a longer rant, but just really meat and potatoes of the boot camp. Like you really start to learn how to ask a question, just in general. Like you give context. It's not, hey, what's this? Hey, this isn't working. How do I fix it? Right? You start developing that professionalism, as a software engineer, as well as being able to communicate effectively in that industry, because that's one thing that, as a mentor now, talking with people, going to get jobs, and talking with instructors, a big thing is being able to talk about your experience, and then being able to have that, basically have that process of a software engineer. Right? You get a task, you do the task. If you have a question, you ask the question with context. Right? You work with developers, and you work with your team, and then you get it solved. So throughout the boot camp, that's what I was getting to be exposed to. That's how the boot camp teaches you. So really, transition from that to the job, it's like a perfect transition. Uh, and one last thing I want to say about, like, while you're in the boot camp, it's literally like your own family, right? It's not like this weird distant learning, right? Because remote learning can feel like that sometimes. I think this was probably one of the most immersed, involved remote setting trainings that I have ever been a part of. And I'm like still extremely grateful for the setting, the knowledge, and just the overall want for people to succeed. I think it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, you've touched on a lot of themes that different people who've been on the podcast have talked about, especially the one about community and family, like you're not going through it alone. And then a lot of people have said that it really prepared them to be a software engineer, but no one articulated the way you did. Like they often talked about stand-ups, but like you talking about how you had to come up with questions, but then not just questions, but like context so that you could explain, like, these are the things I tried, these are like, this is the steps that I've gone through. That really, I mean, that sounds like a real world setting. You would go and you work with your other team members, and if you guys can't figure it out, you go to a supervisor and you ask a question, and then
Right.
they walk you through it. And so I mean, that just was a great way to explain, because people have said, I was prepared for my job. I was prepared for my job. And no one ever talked about that and how important that is, and how important, like, asking questions even when you get into your job. It's like one of the reasons that they drill it into you. Not only is it important while you're learning, but as you continue to learn, continue to develop, you need to continue to ask questions with context. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. Context is huge. I feel like I got grilled for that a lot at the beginning of the boot camp, because I'm like, hey, I don't understand this. And like, well, you don't understand what, where, how, and what happened, and what did you do to fix? I'm like, I don't know. It's broke. And then like week 4, I'm coming in. Hey, yeah. So my HTML element at this line and this line is not working. I tried this, and this, but it wasn't working for some reason. I was blah blah blah. And right, and it just eventually I started getting to a point where I would go and ask a question, and as I was explaining it, I would literally answer it myself, and I'd be like, "Oh, never mind," and they'd be like, "Okay, see you later." And it's just
So
like,
it's
I feel
also,
like they've seen it before.
yeah, well, it's also good for, like you said, you talk yourself through it by
Mhm.
having that context, instead of just being like, I have a question, and they're like, what's your question? And then
Right.
you're
It's
like,
like a waste of time.
this. Well, they're like, I can't help you because I don't know what your process is and what you've done to get to where you're at. And so if you
Mhm.
can explain it, then they can help you, and then also maybe you can figure it out on your own. So I love seeing that arc change. That's really helpful. So you went through the program and you're almost done and it's time to start applying for jobs. So what was the process of, sending out resumes, going through interviews? What was that like?
Beginning of it was nerve wracking, very nerve wracking. I think that I don't know if I was one of the most nervous, but it felt like it. I don't know what it was about. Maybe it's just how I grew up before Navy, and things like that. But for some reason, I just thought it was one of those too good to be true things. I was doing the work, and this is thinking about this towards the end of the boot camp. I'm already developing pages and developing features on different websites and stuff. So I'm doing the work and I'm doing everything. And I'm like, is this what it takes to get this kind of a job? And I just had doubts, right? And I think everyone does. Um, so what I did and how I went about it was I literally followed what they told me to do, because I got to a point where I had to take my emotions out of it, because I felt like they were stopping me from continuing, because it was like, well, what if this? And well, I do this. What if I get in the interview and I don't know how to answer this question? I don't want to look like a dummy, right? And you start having all these thoughts, and I had to literally say, well, I got this far, so I can't give up now. So what am I going to do about it? Well, they have a battle rhythm, exactly what I should do and exactly how to do something to get a job. So let me start with that, and then we'll go from there. I think that was huge. I think the moment that I said, let me just use what they have and use it because they're giving it to me to use. And that for me was a humbling moment, because I knew I didn't have to do it by myself. I also got to rely on my team, being the whole Savio community, that they were going to set me up for success. And I really just had to trust in that. So that's what I did. I made my LinkedIn exactly how they told me to make it. I made my resume exactly how they told me to make it. The only thing that I didn't do what they told me to do was when to start sending resumes. I jumped the gun a little bit, a couple days early, and just started sending them out. But at the end of the day, I got to send out more applications in a week and a half than I have ever sent out in my entire life. And I'll give you my number. I hit 1,200 applications within, I think it was like 12 days, basically, because I was doing almost 100 applications a day, just like a full-time job, just firing them out. And I got so many interviews week 2 and 3. Like I couldn't fit all of them in the schedule. So some interviews I had to do like quick phone screens and be like, hey, I only have 30 minutes. And yeah, so, but yeah, just going through that process. One thing they do is they teach you how to search for a job, right? So like, what are you looking for? What kind of job? Like, what are the descriptions of the jobs? And like, is that actually something that you're experienced in or not? So you get a lot of background information on the industry and jobs themselves. Like it's sometimes it's too much information, right? So as long as you're picking and grabbing what you need, you'll have a sufficient you'll have a sufficient amount of information that you would need to go into the job process educated and knowing what you're looking for and what is a real opportunity. And we have to also keep this in perspective. What is a scam? Because unfortunately, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's a severe increase of scams going on and people just trying to collect personal information and stuff. So they also do a lot of good teaching around things like that in the Savio community alone. I see people posting job posts all the time, like, "Hey, is this legit? Has anybody ever heard of this company?" And immediately there's people responding. Gregorio, CTO, he's usually one of the first people on it, like, "Hey, yes, this is a good company," or "Hey, no, stay away." So yeah, I think that the whole job searching process starts out very anxiety filled, and it as it would with anybody in any field. Like nobody can prevent that. But if you just follow the structure that they build for you and then add in your personality along the way, I feel like there's almost no way to fail.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that not only do you get all this training to be a software engineer, but at the end of the process, they have, I like how you said battle rhythm. They have like a plan to follow, and they've done it over and over. They've refined it, they've tweaked it, they have tried to take out all the bugs to make it seamless. And then on top of that, they have the support of people who can help you, through the program so that you don't get discouraged. And I like how you said I had to take the emotion out, and you're like, okay, I'm taking the emotion out. I'm just going to focus on like what they say to do. Cause sometimes you can get stuck in that, like, it's really hard to hit send on a resume when you're
Yeah,
using your emotions and not just, there's sometimes I have to send an email and I'm like, just hit send and then walk away, because you have to not get stuck in that, like, should I send it? Should I not? What's going to happen? And so
right.
I liked how you talked about that emotion. And then
Yeah,
you said you had like a ton of interviews. So how did you manage like going from interview to interview? Like
an
that's a
Excel
lot.
spreadsheet. Excel spreadsheet. Just having organization is huge. You learn that through the boot camp. You learn that in just life, right? So you have a lot of things coming up. It's probably best to have it on a sticky note, or have it on a calendar, or have it on an Excel spreadsheet. At the time, that's what I used, Excel. I would mark. Originally, when I first started that first week and a half, I logged every application I did, every single company I did, on the day that I did it. And if I got and I put it like sections, if I got remarks back from them, or if I got a comment back, or anything like that. Um, after the after like that week and a half, I fell off the Excel spreadsheet. I couldn't keep consistent with it. I wish I had, but I ended up not needing to. I did get a job, thankfully. But in a sense, like, say I would have been applying for 3 months, that Excel spreadsheet would have been super handy, and I would have needed to stay consistent with it. That way, I can keep track of everything I've done, um, and keep that consistency. But yeah, my main goal was I need 100 applications a day, no ifs, ands, or buts. However, I can do that. That's what I'm going to do. And if I don't do that, I'm not getting a job. And I looked at it like that, and it really just put fire under the seat and said, hey, if you do this work, you will reap the reward. If you slack, you won't, or it just gonna is gonna take way longer, right? And if you're looking for fast results, then you need to put in as much input as you can to get the desired outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes people think the boot camp's the hard part, but you're not done. There's still a lot of
Yeah.
work to get a job. And it's a full-time job. Like, that's like unemployment pay is because you should be spending like a full time looking for a new job, because that's why they give you that pay. And so I think some people don't
Exactly.
think about that, like how much work it is looking for jobs, sending out your resume. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And then doing the interviews. Yeah, so much.
Right. Yeah, the interviews alone, I mean, just it's like an almost, normally they're like an hour, I would say. Average interviews are like 45 minutes to an hour. So, if you have 4 interviews a day, that's 4 hours, and you're going to need a lunch break or something, right?
And a little time to decompress, right?
Right. Yeah. Like you need to be able to have that some kind of mental stability. Like, you can't just bounce interview to interview. I did that twice. I had an interview, and the second interview did not go as well, because I felt like I was just run down. I was just kind of tired. So I could feel the energy was not up as the first one. And I never got a call back from either of those second interviews. So, like, having time to like regain your composure and just take that, it's so important. Because, and just in the phone call, in the interview, I mean, we could spend hours talking about that too. But like, just taking a breath, take that moment. Any point in the boot camp, when you start feeling overwhelmed, take a breath. When you're starting to apply and you feel overwhelmed, take a breath. When you're going in between interviews, take a breath. Just come back to terms with what you've learned, and just follow the structure that you've been taught. And you, like, it's right there for you, and it's been proven over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, you have all those resources. So you gave us a lot of like interview tips and a lot of information on like being really working hard to get that job, like, doing all the research, spending the time, setting a goal for yourself, and like telling yourself, I have to do this so that I can get a job. I think that's really great advice. But I want to end the interview with, what advice would you give someone who is considering diving into software engineering?
Do it. Do it. Simple as that. Just do it and keep kicking. Like, I I cannot express how grateful I am to have acted on my thoughts of wanting to do software engineering when I did. Because, again, everything is about time, right? Everything we do is revolving around time. So if you start now, in 2 years from now, you'll have 2 years of experience. If you wait, every day that you wait, you're losing a day of experience, right? So if at the end of your path you want to be in a comfortable job doing something that allows for you to grow, challenges you mentally, physically, because if you're remote, then you need to be on your P's and Q's about working out and staying fit and active, right? And also all of the other above things, because well, the pay is just amazing, so it can complement anything. And this is what you want, and you're a person that is driven and looks for challenge and loves working with a team, then this is like the literal perfect career for you. And the tech industry alone is probably the largest industry and has the most steady growth, especially in due to humans' love for convenience. So I don't think that software engineering's industry has enough light shed on it at this moment. It's 2023, and I'm going to probably say the same thing in 2025. I feel like it's one of those industries that are hidden from certain people. I went to a generic public school. It very, everything's good. Their curriculum as well, but it's just not a skill that's taught in high school. I mean, I think they do it in some other countries, but I never heard about software engineering until I was in my mid 20s. And I thought that was an issue because I'm upset that I didn't. I wish I knew this when I was 16, right? So I think for someone who is in the know and you're aware of this industry and you feel like you're a person that doesn't give up on yourself, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I agree. Like, there's so many jobs that the schools like don't talk about. I stumbled into engineering when I was in college because a cadet told me I should be an engineer, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And it was like this whole career field that I had never knew about, and only found out about because I decided to join the military. And had I not done that, I don't think I would have even known to look for it. And so I agree. Like,
Right.
if you know about this, there's so many opportunities and there's so many things that you can do. And so, yeah. Thank you
Definitely.
so much for your time. I really enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about you and hear more about your time at Savio.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. Loved being here. And yeah, to anybody who's looking to start anything, just do it. Just do it. Go in and do it.